Very funny.
We now give you our brand new little sweetheart of swing.
Welcome to Stay Tuned, the show for animation lovers. Recorded live on Twitch, broadcast on YouTube, and proudly streaming on Patreon. Coming to you from Austin, Texas, I'm your host, Phil Machi. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Tonight, one of the brilliant minds behind what made Batman the Animated Series into such a legendary cartoon joins me as my special guest. That's right, Andrea Romano is here. All that, and you'll have a chance to share your thoughts, questions, and opinions with me for a live Q&A after the show. The voices of Kevin Conroy as the Dark Knight and Mark Hamill as the Joker redefined those characters in the hearts and minds of countless Bat fans. But how did those actors get the chance to even play those iconic roles? Someone had to cast them. With one of the most impressive careers in animation history, Andrea's work spans across multiple studios and decades. Her resume is something to behold, from Teen Titans to Tiny Toons, Superman to Static Shock. She may have recently retired, but her efforts can still be felt rippling throughout the industry. On the heels of receiving a Winsor McCay Award for her Lifetime Achievement in Animation at the 46th Annual Annie Awards, Andrea Romano is here, and we're going to talk about voice direction, casting, and of course, one of my favorite cartoons, Batman, the Animated Series, in just a few moments. But first, this. Andrea Romano, welcome to Stay Tuned.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
The pleasure is mine, I absolutely assure you. I'm sure when I ask you this, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But there are times where the vocal performance outshines the animation, and the reverse happens where the animation is incredibly emotive, but then you have a weaker vocal performance. But it's one of those things where when the two are at their best, it is one of the most amazing things you can ever look at.
It's magic, isn't it? It truly is magic. And I've had the great good fortune to work on many projects for which that did happen. It may not have begun that way,
right? But
as the animators got more comfortable with the material, as the actors got more comfortable, as I got better, it grew and grew and grew. A good example of that is Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra that I did for Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
Where the voice work, and I wish I could take credit for the casting, but I did not cast that. They had wonderful casting.
Amazing casting, yeah.
Nickelodeon, who did that work. But that was a perfect example of voice work and animation being at the top of their game.
Absolutely.
It really was wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you know those shows, Phil?
Oh, I know them very well. You're right. It becomes magic. It becomes this thing where it kind of like how the whole thing with Batman is he's more than a man. He's a symbol, right? I think animation is the same way. Like once you get past the audience's disbelief, you make a place in their hearts that just lives forever.
Absolutely. And I've been so grateful that when I attend Comic-Cons, people will come up and tell me how these shows affected their lives, their childhood.
Yes.
And then now they're watching them with their children, which is a beautiful thing. But I'll never forget this one young man who came up to me and said, as a teenager, he was on a path that was really dangerous, that he knew he was either going to become a member of a gang or have a life that involved crime. And he started watching Batman the Animated Series, and it became something for him that changed his life and made him a better person. And he showed me the tattoos he had on his body, where he had Batman tattooed on his body and Superman on another place and various other characters. And I thought, this is wonderful that I'm not just reaching people on an entertainment level, but we're reaching them on a social level where it changed his life. And that's crazy good.
I mean, it is incredible, and I'm sure we all have our favorite episodes and moments that we look back on and we think, man, that was when they were just nailing it. And, you know, very rarely is there a show that hits it 100% of the time, of course, right?
Right.
And I would say the same thing goes for Batman. I hate to say that because I want to be like, oh, it's perfect. But when that show was at its, I mean, firing on all cylinders, it was, I still get chills.
Me too.
You know?
Me too. There's an episode called the Gray Ghost episode.
Yes, love that one.
It still gives me chills.
Yes.
It just, there's so much good writing in these various Batman series and all the DC properties.
Yeah.
And of course, that's where we have to jump off from, right? It doesn't matter how good the cast is. It doesn't matter how good the animation is. If the script isn't good, it's not going to gel.
Right.
And we were lucky that there were as many knowledgeable fan writers that wrote so much good material for us that it made the casting easier, it made the direction easier. And what was also so wonderful about that whole experience for me was most of the people that I worked with who were writers were also agreeable to me questioning something in their script and saying, you know, this just isn't flowing as a theatrical moment. We're listening to the scene being played out by the actors. They're working through it, but it's not flowing. What if we were to? And they were agreeable to those suggestions and those ideas from me, from the cast, from animation directors. Everybody was kind of contributing as a group, and that's a beautiful way to work. When people get locked in and their words are so precious that you can't change one of them, then you find that you're not really contributing as an artist. And everybody who works on animation is an artist. They are, in some form or another, they're an artist. And you have to understand that mentality and let them express themselves, and then as a group make a decision. And that's when you get the best products.
You're absolutely right. That's a collaborative industry, so everybody needs to work together to the greater good, which is obviously the show.
That's right.
My takeaway from Batman the Animated Series, I remember being a teenager when it first came out. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. But I remember that, and for me it was the psychology and the humanity in the show. The moments that always touched me were when Batman would refer to somebody by their first name and not their villain name. I always loved that. Like when he would.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, when he would see Two-Face and he would be like, Harvey, no. Right. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, what a. So that was a thing for me. And then the other thing was just seeing how these characters were damaged, and it wasn't about let me destroy them, let me try to reform them. And that was always the most redeeming part of the series. For a character that has no hope as a child, he's pursuing hope as an adult in a very dark way. It's there's very little else in popular culture where I feel like it gets to that level of gradation.
That's a lovely observation. And we always made it very clear that Batman is a human. He's not a superhero as far as he's not an alien. He doesn't have superpowers. He's a human being. And because of that, he can make mistakes.
Sure.
He can, and that adds for a very interesting dynamic. I think the first episode of Batman Beyond, we see Batman almost shoot somebody.
Yeah.
Which Batman never did.
When he says never again is the part you're referring to.
Exactly. The idea that, he can go right to that point of almost doing the wrong thing and then ultimately backing off and making the right decision, having a conscience about this. That's a wonderful character trait for Bruce Wayne / Batman.
Yeah.
The other thing is, we all have had those, I think, those experiences where something has happened where you would personally like vengeance.
Sure.
Sure. You would like to be able to see the bad guy get knocked down. Bruce Wayne struggles with that all the time. Batman struggles with that all the time. He is filled with the need for revenge, but not to the point of killing.
Sure.
He wants to see people punished. He wants to see punishment, that suits the crime. But
Right.
I think that always creates a very interesting dynamic. And when he watches someone like Harvey Dent, and that's a really good example, Harvey Dent was his friend.
Yeah.
And Harvey Dent went bad. Such a wonderful character to be able to see Bruce Wayne appealing to his friend.
Exactly.
And Batman trying to bring the criminal down. That creates wonderful dynamic tension.
It does. And
I love those episodes. The two-parter, the Harvey Dent episode where he becomes the origin story.
It's such
I thought those were wonderful. And I thought Richard Mall was crazy good at that character.
He really was. And that's a surprising thing for maybe people who are watching the show. Whenever you had a character do almost a dual role, because Two-Face is a dual role with the alternate voice, you guys,
sure.
and of course, one of my other favorite villains, which is the ventriloquist.
I'm just going to say that.
Amazing that it was the same person doing both roles. You guys could have had somebody else come in and do it differently, but it's so much greater. And as a fan, when you find out it's the same person, you're like, wow, that just takes it to another level.
And certainly the actors enjoy that too. The actors doing the roles really love to sink their teeth into, okay, how do I make these two characters sound different?
Yeah.
But they have the same backstory. They have the same information, essentially. And George Zanza, who did Toyman and...
Scarface.
Thank you. Scarface and the ventriloquist.
Yeah.
So wonderful. So scary.
Right.
And what was also really fun is to watch the actors. And that was a great advantage as a voice director.
Sure.
That I got to actually stand there and watch it. Now we do have all these DVD extras and we shoot a lot of B-roll at recording sessions. So the fans can actually see these actors doing this work. But to watch how they physically change, they may stand at the microphone differently when they voice one character. For example, Mark Hamill.
Exactly.
To watch him voice the Joker, he literally takes on another physical stance when he's voicing the Joker. And that's so wonderful to watch an actor work through that.
It comes through for sure, because he's so dedicated. Like when you look at the breadth of the history of the Joker with Mark Hamill, I love how he really takes the role seriously, because when you look at projects like The Killing Joke and also Return of the Joker, you think about how he is a more grizzled, darker sounding, he's not this goofy Frank Gorshin kind of a personality anymore.
Right. Well, he never really was fully Frank Gorshin.
He never was.
Because that was a different style of show.
Right.
But you're right. It did change. The character, he did evolve with that character. And so the television series, he's made a slight adjustment as we went into the movies.
Yes.
And I love that.
It's
beautiful. Love that work and that subtlety. It wasn't massive. You could still tell it was the same Joker.
Sure.
But with a slightly different twist on it that made it more appropriate for film than TV.
Yeah. I loved how so much of and you guys echoed this in the animated series so well, so much of Batman's life, meaning the characters he has to face and meet, the challenges he has to meet, so much of it are mirrors of his own personal demons. It's it's a beautiful poeticism to the whole thing.
Yes. And so many wonderful villains. I know that everybody's got their, rogues gallery and stuff, but the Batman villains are awesome. And the way they were handled by Warner Brothers and by DC Comics for the animation that we were making.
Sure.
Whether it was the Mad Hatter.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And why I mention these is, a lot of these characters were well known. For a casting director and a director as myself to call up an agent and say, we've got this project. It's called Batman the Animated Series. There are these guys who do, there's all that kind of pitching that you have to do. But for Batman, everybody knew the characters. Everybody knew what was going on. You did not have to pitch them. So when I would reach out to an agent and say, I'm working on the Batman series, what would happen is over time, because that series took a lot of time of production, agents would reach out to me and say, hey, Roddy McDowell heard that you're making a Batman series and would love to come and play. Or here's my client list, and all of these actors have said to me that they would be interested in coming in and playing on that series. And so that's a wonderful thing. And I would keep the lists of who would reach out to me. And that gave me a beautiful talent pool to reach out to when I was casting various different characters. And as we said earlier, as we got into the Justice League and all the other characters, we had the need for many actors. And so I would have these enormous lists and go, man, let's bring in. So it was kind of a mixing and matching kind of thing. It's like, okay, we've got this character. So-and-so said he wants to do it. Let's bring him in for that. Now, how will that sound against Kevin's Batman and Mark's Joker, and let's make sure that we have voices that will sound like they're in the same world, in the same universe. And that was a beautiful thing for me. That was a lovely advantage.
And I'm sure it was a challenge to try to have to top yourself. I actually really like what you guys did on The Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
With,
Peter Weller?
Yes, but we all knew Mark Hamill as Joker, and you guys went and took a different approach with it,
Right.
and with
Michael Emerson.
Michael Emerson, and I love him as an actor.
Me too.
When I heard that, I was like, what a brilliant piece of casting that is.
Hey, thanks. I'll tell you how that came about.
Yeah.
I would often attend many Comic-Cons, and I still do attend some, but the one in San Diego always had a great Warner Brothers party. They would throw a massive party and everybody would go. And I would use that as like a little casting pool. So I would wander around and look at all the fabulous people that were there and go, ooh, there's Michael Emerson. I love his work on Lost. Let me go introduce myself to him and see if he ever would want to come and play. And that's how I met him and said, would you ever be interested? And he said, oh, sure, absolutely. And I would just look for something for him. It's also where I met John Noble, who I adore.
Yes, he's
and
great.
Met him the same way, and that's how I came to cast him.
From Fringe.
And what was so interesting about Michael Emerson was he was in New York and I was in LA. And we did 2 or 3 recording sessions over Skype and ISDN. So I could see him and we would record it. And he was fantastic. I just loved his work. And then, as we always do, we do an initial record. It goes out to animation. It comes back. We do ADR to picture to fix anything, to make adjustments, to give an actor another chance at something, to do the fight sounds that were needed. And at the end of that ADR recording, Michael said to me, and now he's a very established actor, has done a ton of fabulous work.
Absolutely.
And he said to me, Andrea, that is the hardest work I have ever done.
Wow.
And I was shocked. And I said, why was that so hard? And he wasn't able to articulate exactly why it was so hard. I think there were several things, including the fact that we weren't in the same room at the same time. And I always prefer that whenever possible. But, there's a slight one level of separation when you're dealing with, for example, this interview that you and I are doing. If we were sitting in the same room, there would be a different energy about it.
There would.
This is the next best thing.
Yeah.
But so I just think that finding the Joker for him, because there was an established voice, Mark Hamill was known as the Joker, finding his own take on this character, and that's a very high energy character. And so that's exhausting.
Yeah.
And because he didn't have the physical ability to, be filmed doing it as far as that's the work that's going to be seen, again, another step of separation for him. We had to find the work in the voice that we would then animate to make him be the crazy nut that the Joker is. But I loved his work, and I loved Peter Weller's work on that.
Yes.
And, I always have discussed the difficulty of recasting any of these characters. For me, when I prep a script that has Batman in it or the Joker in it, it's always Kevin's voice that I hear. It's always Mark's voice that I hear. But often we're given the directive, okay, we're going to use a different style of animation. Andrea, we need you to cast a new Batman. We need you to cast a new Joker. And my first question always was, please can't I use Kevin? Please can't I use Mark? And sometimes they would say yes. And then sometimes they would say no. And when they would say no, I would have to really put my thinking cap on. It got easier later on in my career because at that point, I had reached out to so many actors who might have been interested in doing those roles but wasn't available. And so I would keep that list and be able to go back and say to whomever, would you like to come and play on Batman on this project? I understood you were interested last time, but you were in the middle of a series you were doing, whatever. And so it became a little bit easier on that level. But I'm telling you, Phil, back in I would say in maybe the early 200s at a Comic-Con, someone said to me, at that point, Andrea, you have cast Batman 17 times.
Oh, wow.
Now, I had not counted it. And it may be as simple as in a Superman episode, there was a flashback and they wanted a different Batman to do 2 or 3 lines. And so I had to cast that. It wasn't Kevin Conroy. And so this person that had given me that statistic had counted all of those things and said, at that point, I had cast Batman 17 times.
Of course that person counted, because there are people out there who that's what they do with their time.
And I was very grateful that they had done the counting for me because I didn't even know. I was shocked when he said that to me. And by now, it's got to be, at least double that.
Sure. The people that have played Joker on film, I know it's been said from Jack Nicholson. Obviously, we all know what happened with Heath. It's been said that role affects a person after they do it. Did Mark or any other person that you cast as Joker, did they ever give you a hint afterwards that they needed to take a break because it was kind of screwing with them a little bit?
I never did hear that from anybody. And I think that's because of the nature of the way that animation is done and the way the voice work is recorded. There's a lot of humor in our cartoons. Even the darkest cartoons that we made had humor in them. And so we tried to find a way to take the actor out of that dark place they had to go to. And certainly that may have happened, Phil, but nobody ever mentioned it to me. They found a way to deal with it themselves. And because animation is, for example, Mark Hamill, he may be doing a Joker episode for me one day and then going over and doing a SpongeBob the next day and then going out and doing some other project the next. There's so many other things for him to do and for all those actors who played those dark characters to do that I don't think they get as deeply into a period of time that they have to maintain that attitude.
Right.
So, for example, Heath Ledger, who did have to, over a period of shooting over months or weeks or whatever, had to stay in that mindset, that messes with the head for sure. Our industry gives a much more of a break in between sessions.
That's
that
good.
They can get their life, walk back into the sunlight.
That exactly. It's very important to have that separation.
Right.
You mentioned Hanna-Barbera, but you also worked for Disney for a time. So how was it different working for Warner Brothers, Disney? Like, what was the differences between the studios for you?
They all have their own temperament, their business plans, the way they do things. But the truth of it is, the first directing work I did was for Disney. The very first series I ever directed was DuckTales.
Yep, that's right.
And that was my first exposure as a director. Now, Hanna-Barbera was my first as a casting director. And oddly enough, this would never be allowed today, I was able to stay on staff at Hanna-Barbera, and one day a week I would go over to Disney and direct DuckTales. And they would never allow that today. You could never be on staff at two places. You certainly could be freelance at both places, but you couldn't be on staff at one. And
wow.
I was so lucky that I was able to do that. But my job essentially was always the same. So whether it was Disney or Cartoon Network or Warner Brothers or Titmouse Animation or whomever, my job stayed the same. It was always cast, if I was casting, and direct the best possible vocal track for the animators so that they can then go off and create a beautiful cartoon based on that. So their business plans might have been a little bit different. There may be a difference as far as how many people would come to the sessions, but essentially the job was the same for me.
That's nice that there's some consistency across the board.
Correct.
It helps you out, I imagine.
Yep.
I would guess something like producing natural laughter would be harder than other things, or at least more difficult than other people assume. Is that accurate?
There are certain things that wonderful, talented actors cannot do. And laughing, not just naturally, but on cue.
Right.
Like at a 9 o'clock in the morning session. I always would joke with actors saying, you know what, let's do that laugh at the end of the session because you'll be more warmed up. And also what would happen sometimes is you'd have to actually get the entire room to laugh. So everybody laugh, ha, 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 everybody laugh. And when somebody laughs, it's easier for you to laugh and the next person laughs and you get the whole room laughing.
Yep.
You cut off everybody else, stop them all from laughing and get that one person that you needed that natural laugh from to continue laughing, and that's what you use.
How
So
interesting.
there are tricks to help people get into a nice natural laugh. Some of the first voiceover work that I ever did was trying to help a young actor. This was the kid who was playing Robin for us in Return of the Joker. And he had to have that moment. He was under the spell of the Joker when he went from hysterical Joker-like laughing into abject weeping.
Yes.
And so I could not get the kid to do it. He was just a young kid. He was maybe 12 years old. And that's a really hard thing to do no matter what.
That's a heavy scene, too. That is a heavy, heavy scene.
Really heavy scene. And the kid just couldn't get it. And so Bruce Timm asked me to scratch it. Sometimes it's referred to as scratching. Sometimes it's referred to as dummying it. It's just doing the vocal track that will later be replaced by an actor for the session. And so I just dummied it. It was easy for me to do. I had no problem. I am an actress. I knew what needed to be done. I had done it 10 times already for the young actor, trying to get him to do it. And he couldn't get to it. And ultimately, Bruce Timm decided to save it and use my track. And I'm very grateful because it got me paid, which was lovely.
Wow.
But I didn't think I was the best person to do that. If there had been money for it, I would have found a sound-alike and had that person do it. But Bruce liked it well enough to leave my track. So when you listen to that voice, that's me in there. In that one little tiny section.
I can hear it in my head. Like, that scene was burned into my brain, and that is a very powerful scene. It's cool to know that you did that.
Thank you very much.
It's very, very effective. I mean, really.
Thanks.
Was there a reason why you never made acting more of your main career?
I'll tell you exactly why. I had very, very practical parents. And while I went off to study acting as a college student, my mom took me aside and said, honey, do you know what a difficult business you're choosing to go into? How much rejection there is. And that always played in the back of my mind. It brought me great joy to be an actress. I loved acting. But when I started doing things on the other side, as far as being an agent, being a casting director, being a director, I saw an opportunity for me to be able to use my acting skill to work with the actors to get a performance, for me as a director. And that gave me my artistic outlet, the same that acting did. But here's what bugged me, Phil, was that no matter how talented an actor was, when they finished a job and the job was done and they had no further work on it, they were as unemployed as the guy that just got laid off from McDonald's. And so that weighed heavy on my practicality side. Once I had started directing, I realized how much I liked it. And it wasn't that I wouldn't have loved to be an actor as well, but I never wanted to take a role as a casting director, take a role from an actor who should have had it instead of me. And there were some things that I did do and some roles that I did play, and sometimes often that I would go in and help an actor when they weren't good at fight walla or fight sounds, where I would go in and do their strains for them, or they just didn't have the technique with their voice to do something like, say they were pulling themselves up on a ladder. That can be very stressful on the voice. And some actors, if they did that, they then couldn't do dialogue afterwards because their voices were strained. So easy for me to go in and do that for them. I was the voice of the Bat Computer in a lot of different cartoons. I did it a bit, and that made me really happy to do that. But that is one role that I would love to have been for every single cartoon.
Well, heck, you could have been Aya in the Green Lantern animated series.
Thank you very much for that.
See?
I didn't work on that series. I didn't work on the Green Lantern series. That was one that we just couldn't make a deal. And so that was a purely financial situation. But, I worked so much. I cannot complain. I worked almost too much. I had a hard time ever saying no. My assistant used to say to me, Andrea, practice it with me. No, thank you. Because I could never say no. There'd be these beautiful projects offered to me and I would just say, okay, I'll find time. And there was one time, this was in the 90s, when I was doing 11 projects simultaneously.
Oh my gosh.
It was insane. It was ridiculous. Only because I was young enough and had enough energy could I do that. There was no way I could do that toward the end of my career. But it was everything from Pinky and the Brain and Animaniacs and Land Before Time and Tiny Toons and Teen Titans and movies and all. And how could I say no? They were all such brilliant projects.
And they are now part of our culture. So
amazing. Amazing.
I have one question for you left, Andrea. What can you tell us about witnessing an actor's aha moment and what it took for you to get them there? And what I mean by that is, I imagine any actor coming to a character for maybe the first few lines are probably a little bit stiff, and then at some point they start realizing who that person is to them.
Right.
That kind of
That's
thing.
absolutely true. That's absolutely true. And there's two stories I want to tell you about that. One is when we were working with Peter Weller, there was a moment in a scene, an attitude that we needed in a scene that neither Bruce nor I were able to articulate in words. We just couldn't get it. We couldn't find the proper words, and we both worked really hard. And so I turned to Bruce and I watched him, and he's in the back of the room, as he often was, sketching. And he drew a picture of the Bruce Wayne character that Peter Weller was playing and put an expression on the face and walked up to the glass separating us from Peter, turned the picture toward Peter, stuck it up against the glass. Peter looked at it for 2 seconds and said, "Got it." Did the line again perfectly, exactly the way we needed it. So that was not necessarily anything I contributed to that. That was all Bruce Timm. But, as they say, a picture being worth 1,000 words.
Absolutely.
But it was a beautiful aha moment. But a voice sample of that was when we hired Michael and Sarah to play Mr. Freeze.
Yes. Oh, my gosh.
And we
amazing.
always used as much as possible an ensemble record, meaning everybody was in the room at the same time. And Michael was working with the cast and doing a good job, and I thought giving a perfectly fine performance for that character. Now, keep in mind, whenever a character first appeared, for me, it was kind of the first experience experience I would have in understanding that character really well. While Bruce Timm had known those characters for years and years and years from reading the comics, being a fan, working on the series, he had an idea for Mr. Freeze that apparently we weren't getting from Michael. And so he would give me the occasional note that I would then give to Michael. And what would happen was Bruce would give me a note, and I would, without having my hand on the talkback button, so the actors could not hear this conversation between Bruce and myself. And then it would be my job to interpret that in actors' terms so the actor could understand what it was what Bruce was trying to express and what we were trying to get from the performance. And so I had given that a couple of times to Michael, and he just wasn't quite getting it. But I knew Michael was the guy for the role. And so rather than embarrass him and take a lot of time in the recording session and slow it down with the rest of the actors, I just continued through the session. As we reached the end of the session, I said, Michael, will you stay a little bit after the session? We want to work on a few things with you and just play a little bit. He said, sure, no problem. So I released all the rest of the actors, and Bruce and I went in and discussed the character with Michael in detail. Just the three of us sitting very intimately discussing what it was about that character and how we couldn't just play him cold. We had to talk about what made this man so cold. What was the backstory, and explain to Michael how he had lost his wife and all this information. And then we discussed it, and Michael was able to ask questions, and Bruce was able to elaborate on a lot of what was going on. And then we went back into the booth and left Michael in the studio, and I would feed him his lines. And it was that absolute eureka moment of he just needed to have all that information so he could inform the performance with history. He understood now how tortured this man was and why he had become this bitter human being.
Yeah.
And it created this wonderful, cold vocal track. And Michael was one of my favorite actors to work with and one of my favorite characters. And he was not initially. I thought Michael kicked butt performing that character over what the live action feature chose to do.
Oh, yeah.
And it was such a sympathetic, wonderful character that he wasn't just a villain. This was a tortured man who had lost the love of his life.
Right. Only to get her back again and have her reject him. His character arc is just such a tragedy.
Wonderful story. Well, made me really happy.
Well, Andrea, truly, I could talk Batman with you all day, but I won't. I will let you go. But I do want to say, really, this was such a treat having you here, and it's something that, for me, it's a dream come true, just because I am one of those people that the shows you guys produced have greatly benefited my own life. And I will say, with as much respect as I possibly can to what they're working on now, since you've retired, I personally have noticed a change in some of the quality. So I attribute that to you being not there. And so,
Thank you for all your kind words. That's so sweet. I loved my job. I loved what I did. I spent a tremendous amount of time laughing and being in the company of remarkably talented people. And so I was the lucky one. And Phil, I would love to do this with you again sometime. If you find other things you'd like to discuss, reach out to me again.
Absolutely.
And we'll do another one of these someday.
Of course. Yeah, you don't have to ask me twice or twist my arm.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That was the late Michael Ansara as Mr. Freeze from the Batman the Animated Series episode titled Heart of Ice, with music by Todd Hayen and Shirley Walker. Michael played the icy villain beyond that series, including the feature-length film Batman and Mr. Freeze, Sub-Zero. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Special thanks go out to Andrea Romano once again for joining us here on the show. Thanks so much to all of you watching live on Twitch. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you would like to support Stay Tuned, join me over on Patreon at patreon.com/Phil Machi to become a subscriber today. With cool rewards like exclusive interview outtakes, you can also stream this show anytime you like, which means never missing an episode. For more fun, check out my original comic books at retailsunshine.com, and you can interact with me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook under the handles of both Retail Sunshine and Phil Machi. Also, you can keep up to date with the latest animation news by visiting this show at facebook.com/Stay Tuned Show. I've been Phil Machi, you've been a wonderful audience, and until next time, keep those eyeballs peeled, those ears open, and be sure to stay tuned. Alrighty. Man. Well, thank you guys. If you missed the interview, if you're just coming in now, this will be live active on YouTube tomorrow. So very soon here, when I get off the horn here, I'll be making it for YouTube. But so don't worry if you missed it. It's okay. But if you're here now, welcome to the after party. And before we get started with our usual shenanigans, I would like to make sure that I remember to thank my Rubber Hose subscribers. And if you're wondering what a Rubber Hose subscriber is, well, it's a